a look at just how to add and subtract integers, which is a little bit different than multiplying and dividing, so don't confuse them. Okay, basically the same type of thing we had before. We're going to look at what happens when the two numbers have the same sign. So when I'm adding two numbers with the same sign, I'm going to add the numbers and keep the sign the same. Okay, and then when I have two numbers with a different sign, even though there may be a plus sign in the problem, I'm going to subtract the numbers and I'm going to keep the sign of the biggest. So let's take a look at example 5 here, in which I have a -6 plus a -3. So I'm adding two numbers with the same sign. So if I look back to my rules, if I have two numbers with the same sign, I have to add the two numbers and keep the negative sign. So I'm going to keep the negative sign and just add my two numbers. 6 plus 3 is 9. Okay, let's take a look at number 6. If you notice, my signs are different here. I have a -6 and a +7. I'm always looking in front of the number for its sign. So the signs are different here. So remember my rule for adding signs? If the signs are different, I'm going to subtract the two numbers and keep the sign of the bigger number. So I'm going to take a 7 minus 6, that's going to give me a 1. The bigger number here is the 7, which is positive. So the answer is a +1. Okay, so here I have a -4 and the -9. These are the same sign. Right? You can think of that minus sign as part of the 9. That's a -9. -4 and -9. So the two numbers are the same sign, so I'm just going to add them. I'm going to add them and I'm going to keep the sign that's the same of both of them, which is negative. So that's a -13. Okay, let's take a look at number 8, which is a little bit different. You see these double negatives here? Let's treat that like a multiplication. Okay, here in example 8 we have these two negative signs. So I'm going to treat that like a multiplication. So that's a negative times a negative, which comes out. Remember my rules for multiplication? When I have my tic-tac-toe board, my negative times my negative gives me a positive, so that those two negatives multiply to a positive. So that becomes 8 plus 1. At this point I have two positives. I had +8 and a +1, so I'm just going to add them and keep the sign. It's a +9. Okay, in example 9, again, you got those two negatives there, so treat that like a multiplication. A negative times a negative is a positive. Okay, now I have a -2 and a +10. Those are two numbers, different sign, right? So if they're different sign, I'm going to go ahead and subtract the two numbers. 10 minus 2 is 8. And I'm going to keep the sign of the bigger number. The bigger number here is positive, so my answer is positive. Okay, finally let's take a look at number 10, which looks a little scary, but don't freak out on me. The first thing that I notice is these double negatives right here, which we were just talking about. Those double negatives should be multiplied, so that a negative times a -1 comes out to be a +1. Okay, now we can go ahead and do our signs. So what I'm going to do here is collect all my negatives together. So I have a -8, a -6, and -10. I'm going to add all those three together because they're all negatives. So it makes sense to add all them together. 8 plus 6 plus 10 is 24. Keep my negative sign. Now let's add the positives together. I have a +4, a +3, and a +1. When I add 4, 3, and 1, I get +8. Finally, I have a -24 and a +8. Those are two numbers, different sign. So if they are different sign, I'm going to go ahead and subtract the two numbers. So I'm going to take 24 minus 8, that's 16. And I'm going to keep the sign of the biggest number, which in this case is negative. Okay, now it's time for you to get some practice with this.